Hello and welcome everybody. Today's Friday Transportation Seminar, we're going to have Dr. Hongwei Dong, and he will be speaking about moving towards equitable transit-oriented developments by integrating transit and housing. My name is Teresa Somrick. I'm the Office and Events Coordinator for TREC, the Transportation Research and Education Center at Portland State University, and I will be moderating today's seminar. Our Friday transportation seminars have been a tradition since 2000, and they're usually held live on Portland State University's urban campus, in addition to being broadcast as webinars. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, today's seminar will be hosted fully online. Today, we're super pleased to have Dr. Hongwei Dong with us. He's a PSU alumnus, and he earned a PhD in Urban Studies from the Tulane School of Urban Studies and Planning in 2010. Before jumping into the seminar, I'd like to let you know about a few upcoming events. On April 24th, we're hosting our rescheduled seminar with Ana Maria Perez on a no crash course in Vision Zero data with our partner PBOT, the Portland Bureau of Transportation. On May 8th, we will have Tammy Lee and Kristen Tufte from Portland State University presenting on creating and using a publicly available multimodal transportation data archive. On May 22nd, we will have John MacArthur and Aaron Golub from Portland State University presenting their research on understanding technology-based exclusion in emerging smart mobility systems. And before I hand it off over to Dr. Dong, I thought I'd let you know what to expect from the webinar here. Dr. Dong will present for about 40 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. We will be recording today's webinar and it will be available on our website later today. And you'll also receive the video recording and presentation slides in an email following the webinar in a day or two. If you are tracking professional development hours, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. During the presentation, you may submit questions by using the questions pane on your control panel. I will keep track of your questions and Dr. Dong will respond to them at the end of the webinar. If we run out of time for all your questions, we'll give Dr. Dong the opportunity to send out written responses for any questions left unanswered. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Dong.
Hello. Hey, good morning. Can everyone hear me? Teresa, can you hear? Hello?
Yes,
so I assume everyone can hear me now. And you can also see the PowerPoint. Okay, let's start. Hi, this is Hongwei. Today, I would like to present how we can move toward equitable transit-oriented development by integrating transit and housing in the context of California. The context. Okay. So before the presentation, I would like to introduce myself. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Planning at the California State University, Fresno. My research interests include housing and real estate, transportation and land use, and healthy cities. I was, as Teresa mentioned, I was a PhD student in urban studies in the Tulane School between 2005 and 2010. When I was a PhD student at PSU, I went to many Friday transportation seminar. One Friday transportation seminar I still remember today is the one that was given by Brian Greger. He was a ODOT research staff. In his presentation, he showcased a land use model that was being developed by ODOT at that time. And that was my first time hearing about land use modeling. And because the presentation was pretty technical, I was lost most of the time. But I got the feeling that that's something I could do. And at that time, as a third-year PhD student, I was looking for a research topic for my dissertation. And after the seminar, I decided to learn more about land use modeling, and that became a specialized area of my research. So in my dissertation, I developed a housing supply model to test how developers respond to Portland's smart growth policies. So I was deeply influenced by this Friday transportation seminar. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to give a talk for the seminar today. While working in California, I maintained my research interest in Portland's urban growth and housing market. Here you see a few publications that I published in the past few years. One publication that is directly related to today's topic is the one that I published in 2017 in Journal of Transport Geography. And in this paper, I studied gentrification, transit-induced gentrification in Portland. So basically in this study, I developed a longitudinal called the experimental design to evaluate whether the 5 rail transit lines in Portland, in suburban Portland, caused gentrification in surrounding neighborhoods. So I used data from OLIs and sensors from 1990s all the way to 2010s. And the findings from this study, so in Portland, in suburban Portland, I did not find consistent evidence for rail transit-induced gentrification. I did not find evidence that rail transit reduced home affordability in surrounding neighborhoods. I did observe that the East Line neighborhoods, they experienced more changes than the neighborhoods served by other rail transit lines. They attracted more older and less educated population. So that's the opposite of gentrification, actually. And the neighborhoods served by the East Line experienced densification during the study period, and they saw a faster increase of rental properties in their neighborhoods. So that's my study of Portland regarding gentrification, regarding rail transit and gentrification. Today's presentation, however, is in California. I would like to see how rail transit in California cause higher rent. Here you see the outline of my presentation. I expect to finish the presentation within 45 minutes. I will be happy to take questions after my presentation. So in case some audience are not familiar with transit-oriented development, I would like to define the term. So transit-oriented development, TOD, as the name implies, it means a real estate development that is centered on transit, particularly rail transit. And the neighborhood or the development is designed to support public transit by higher density, by a greater level of mixed use, and by local streets that are walkable. So that's what I mean by transit-oriented development. In California, TOD is being touted as a potential solution for California's housing affordability crisis. I'm sure you know California has the nation's most serious housing affordability problem. Almost a quarter of homeless Americans are in California. So 3 years ago, California Senator Weiner introduced a bill. So the Senate, the idea behind this SB 50 is to upzone land near transit and in job-rich neighborhood. So more higher density apartments can be built close to rail transit stations, can be built in job-rich neighborhoods. the bill was proposed 3 years ago, and it never passed the California Senate. It has been very controversial, and interestingly, it draws opposition from both wealthy homeowners and low-income tenants. So for wealthy homeowners in California, they were opposed to this idea because they were concerned that higher density development, upzoning, transit in their neighborhoods will lower property values. So they say, not in my backyard. Well, for low-income tenants, they were concerned that upzoning and TOD could cause gentrification, could raise the rent they have to pay every month, and they may be displaced if they cannot pay the rent. So this bill draw opposition from both wealthy people and the low-income tenants. But in the literature, the property effects, the property value effects of real transit are well studied because housing transaction data are readily available from county assessor offices. So in general, the majority of the studies found a positive and significant impact of real transit on property values. In general, this is celebrated by researchers as a positive impact of transit on economic development. So the positive impact of real transit benefit property owners, homeowners, and for local governments, it is used as a justification for the high cost of building and operating a real transit. But the question is, how about renters? This question has not been well answered by literature because rent data are much harder to obtain. Rent data are not publicly available. But this is an important question because it has important equity implications. So unlike homeowners who can benefit from TOD premium could be a burden for renters. And if TOD does raise rent and cause gentrification, low-income tenants may be displaced. And that caused what I call a affordability paradox of TOD. That means low-income renters, they use transit more. They are more relied on public transit, but they could not afford living close to transit. So in this study, I decided to explore this problem in California. So basically, I want to know how much more California renters have to pay to live close to real transit. And if there is a TOD rent premium, does it vary by metro area, by dwelling size, and by the type of TOD? So basically, in this presentation, I will show you how real transit influence rent in California. So the context of this study include the 8 metropolitan areas in California. Almost all the real transit service is in these 8 metropolitan areas. There are a total of 708 real transit stations. I removed 2 funicular stations and 12 airport rail stations because they serve airport passengers only. So that left me with 694 real transit stations. And as you can see, they are concentrated in the 5 largest metro areas in California. That is San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, and Sacramento. So the data are from different sources. The rent data are scraped from Craigslist. Craigslist.com is the most popular website for landlords, for property owners to post their listings, to advertise their rental properties online. My real transit data is purchased from the transportationpolitics.com, and the data I use to measure neighborhood environment, social and built environment, are from American Community Survey, ACS 2014 to 2018, the most recent one. This is, and the employment data is from the longitudinal employer household dynamics. It's also provided by census. The most recent version is in 2017. I also use census Tiger data for boundaries for local streets. So Craigslist data, I scraped Craigslist data from the end of December 2019 to the end of January 2020. So in 35 days, I scraped all the Craigslist listings, so for apartment and houses in the 8 Californian metropolitan areas. I would like to mention that because Craigslist data are non-traditional data, and they may not be representative. Professor Boeing at USC published a few papers on Craigslist data, and basically his studies show that Craigslist data are more likely to be in communities that are wider, wealthier, and better educated. So basically, Craigslist listings overrepresent the high-end market, but underrepresent the lower end of the market, the rental market. But without publicly available rent data, Craigslist data are very useful, and the Craigslist data have a few advantages that I like. One is that it is crowdsourced. It is very comprehensive. It is very large. It is big data, and it is free, and it is more current. Like my data was about the rental market just 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So it is more current than the traditional data set, like American Community Survey or American Housing Survey. And more importantly, it is available at a fine spatial scale. So every Craigslist listing has an address for that property. It is available at the point level, and it is very important for this study because I need to know which rental property is in a transit service area and which ones are not. And I need to know which neighborhoods they are in. So this is very important for this research. And actually, Craigslist data provide very rich information about the spot market. So Craigslist data are very useful for this research. But Craigslist data are also very messy. Craigslist data are crowdsourced. They are not designed for research. And the first problem with Craigslist data is that there are many duplicates. So basically, that's because landlords, property owners, managers, they keep reposting their listings every few days to maintain visibility, to make sure their property is on the first page. So I have to remove all these duplicates. And another problem is that the address information in some listings are not accurate. Intentionally or unintentionally, some landlords provide inaccurate addresses. So I have to figure out which listings have accurate and which listings don't have accurate address. And this process is very time consuming, it's very tedious. So basically I spend almost 80% of time on data cleaning, data preparing, and only 20 time on data analysis. So I scraped 370,000 listings in 35 days. And I use 73,000 of them for this analysis. Basically, after removing those duplicates, after removing all the listings with inaccurate addresses, only about 30% of them, 20–30% of them are useful. So to better understand my data, Craigslist data, I compare my Craigslist data with ACS, American Community Survey data, and American Housing Survey data. So here you see the median rent. The first column represent the median rents in 8 metro areas that I calculated based on Craigslist data. And the second and the third column represent median rent reported by ACS and AHS. So here you can see obviously clearly Craigslist data represent the higher end of the market. So the median rent are a lot higher than the median rents are reported by American Community Survey, by American Housing Survey. I also compare dwelling size. So my finding is that Craigslist data, they all represent smaller rental properties with like 1 bedroom, but they underrepresent larger rental units like those with 3 or more bedrooms. So we need to keep this in mind. I also compare the neighborhoods they are in. So basically, the data show that Craigslist listings are more likely to be in neighborhoods with small jobs, with newer homes, with more white and Asian population, and with higher income. They are more likely to be in central cities. So in general, my findings are consistent with the findings by Professor Boeing. So in general, Craigslist listings, they all represent higher end market. So that's Craigslist data. So how do I measure TOD, or transit-oriented development, or the service area of real transit? So you see a picture here, right? So the yellow area represent a half-mile street network distance buffer. And you can see that the yellow area is slightly smaller than the half-mile circle buffer. And the blue area, they represent what I call transitional area. They are more than a half-mile away from real transit stations, but they are less than 1 mile. So the blue area represent a transitional area. And rental units outside of this blue area, they are at least 1 mile away from any real transit station. I call them non-TOD units. So basically, in this study, I focus on the TOD units in the yellow area and the non-TOD units outside of the blue area. Basically, I ignored the rental properties in the blue area because their status is ambiguous. So in the following, you will see that I will compare TOD units with non-TOD units through propensity score matching. Okay, so that's how I define TOD. There are a few approaches that we can use to tease out the effect of TOD on rent. So many factors can determine the price of a rental property, the monthly rent. So the goal here is to tease out the impact of real transit from many other factors. So one commonly used approach is called the hedonic model. It is the ordinary least squared regression. This is easy. It is easy to use. It is easy to interpret, but it has two critical issues. One is that, like in my case, rental properties, apartments, they have spatial autocorrelation. That means nearby properties, they share a lot of similarities that may not be well controlled. So that violates one assumption of the linear regression. Another problem is that the self-selection problem. We have this self-selection problem because real transit is not randomly distributed in a region. Urban planners, transportation planners put real transit line in some neighborhoods for a reason. So because real transit is not randomly distributed, it is very possible that properties or rental units in TODs or have access to real transit are systematically different from from rental units that don't have access to real transit. So that means they are self-selected into those TOD areas. The second approach is called spatial regression. This method gained popularity in the past decade. So basically, we can use spatial lag, spatial error, or a mix of the two to control spatial autocorrelation. So it solves the spatial autocorrelation problem. But the problem with this method is there are at least two issues. One, it still does not address this self-selection problem. Another problem with the spatial model is that you have to construct a spatial weight matrix before you run the model. That means you assume you know the spatial relationship, which may not be true in reality. So in this study, I decided to try a third approach, which has not been widely used, that is propensity score matching. So how I use this approach? The idea is quite similar, quite simple. So in order to use propensity score matching, I divide the rental units, my Kaggle listings, into three groups. So as you have seen in that picture, I divide them into three groups. One group of rental units, they are within half mile of real transit stations. So they are TOD units. I also have rental units in transitional areas. They are between half mile and 1 mile distance to real transit. And I also have non-TOD rental units. They are at least 1 mile away. So basically, I delete or removed those rental units in the transitional area. I combine the TOD units with non-TOD units, and I run a logit model, calculate the propensity score to decide what non-TOD units can serve as a control. So the result is a group of treatment group. The treatment group include the rental units that have access to real transit. So I call them TOD units. The control group include the rental units that are very similar or are identical to TOD units, except that they don't have access to real transit. So basically, the treatment group and the control group, they are identical in terms of housing attributes, like how large a rental unit is, how many bedrooms, what kind of neighborhoods they are located, and their location within a metro area. So the only difference is one is served by transit and the other one is not by real transit. And then I compare their average monthly rent. That is the average treatment effect. That is the impact of real transit on rental units. So this is how I use the propensity score matching, and why I choose this method rather than the linear regression or the spatial regression. For me, there are three advantages associated with the PSM approach. One is that it addresses the self-selection problem by identifying a control group. And we are able to know how well matched between the control group and the treatment group. Because we are not running regression here, so spatial autocorrelation is not a concern anymore. And the third advantage is that when I use this PSM approach, I identify a control group. So the study design is determined before analysis. This is unlike regression. So when we run a regression model, the model results are always inside. That means we always see the model results. So one may be tempted to keep modifying the model to achieve desirable results, or that's called p-value hiking. But in this case, because the treatment group and the control group are determined before analysis, it is like a randomized control trial. So this is another advantage that I like. Well, there are some technical decisions we have to make in order to use this propensity score matching. One important decision we have to make to use this method is, do we allow non-TOD units to serve as a control for multiple treated cases? If the answer is yes, that is with replacement, that means one non-TOD rental unit can be served as a control for multiple TOD units. If replacement is not allowed, one non-TOD unit can be used only once. So once it is peaked, it is not available anymore. So there's a trade-off here. If we allow one non-TOD unit to serve as a control for multiple treated cases, the matching quality is low. But we can match almost every TOD unit with a control case. If replacement is not allowed, the matching quality is high, but we may not be able to find control cases for every TOD units. Here it is. So in this table, I show you, I run both. Actually, I run both. So on the left here, you see I have a total of 12,863 TOD units. They have access to rural transit in California. I have 28,135 rental units in California. They don't have access to rural transit, and they can serve as control. So here on the left, you see that if I don't allow replacement, that means one control case can only serve as a control for one treated case. I can match 7,446 of them with appropriate control cases, and more than 5,000 of them are not matched. On the right side, if I allow replacement, every treated cases can be matched. But in the following slides, I decide to report my findings based on this match without replacement, because of its high quality of matching. Well, the cost I have to pay here is that not every TOD rental unit can be matched. So as I said, the idea here is to find a control group that are very similar to the treatment group. But to what extent they are similar, right? So here are the control variables I use, 18 of them. So the first group of control variables are called covariates in the PSM is the housing attributes, like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how many, what's the building structure, apartment, multiplex, like that. And the second group of control variables, they are the neighborhood's environment, like land use, density, mixed use, the characteristics of housing stock, and the social environment of the neighborhood, like income, the share of minority population, as well as their locational characteristics, like distance to the CBD, which specific metro area. So these are the control variables. So I want to make sure my control group are very similar to the treatment group in terms of these characteristics. And I see similar or identical. So how do we determine if a treatment group is very similar or identical to the treatment group? A commonly used approach is called paired t-test. So basically, you run a t-test to compare the control group and the treatment group. For example, you can compare whether the number of bedrooms of the rental units in the control group and in the treatment group is the same. So you can run a t-test. The problem with this t-test approach is that t-test is sensitive to sample size. That means if you have a very large sample size, a very small difference could be statistically significant. So that means when you have a large sample, it becomes more difficult for you to find two similar groups. So that means large sample size could be a disadvantage. And that does not make sense because we do want large sample size. So now researchers propose different criteria we can decide whether treatment and control group are similar. One is standardized difference. So the formula you can, the formula of this to calculate standardized difference can be found in this paper. So basically the advantage of standardized difference is that it is not sensitive to sample size. And the rule of thumb is that if the standardized difference between two groups is smaller than 0.1, it is a negligible difference. And researchers also suggest, in addition to compare the average, the mean values, we may also want to compare the variance. So we want to make sure they not only have similar mean values, they have similar distribution. So here you see the mean values of these 18 control variables between the treatment group, the first column, and the control group, the second column, and the third column is the difference, and the fourth column is the standardized mean difference. Well, here you can see the difference between the treatment group and the control group are quite small. And the standardized difference, they are all below 0.1. Actually, some of them are even below 0.01. So basically, without replacement, the treatment and control groups are very well matched in my case. So now we are pretty confident that the treated group and the control group, they are quite similar, except that one is served by transit, by real transit, and the other one is not. So now we are ready to compare their difference, the monthly rent. So this table shows you the average monthly rent of the control group. Here it is $2,545, and the average monthly rent of the control group, that is $2,418 per month. So the difference between them is called the average treatment effect. That's the impact of TOD, or real transit. So the TOD premium, the TOD rent premium on average in California is $127. That's about 5% of the average rent. And $127 per month is a significant number. It is statistically significant. So that's the average TOD rent premium in California based on my Craigslist data. In the next few slides, I will show you whether TOD rent premium varies, like by dwelling size, by metro area, and by the type of TOD. So what I do here is I subdivide the TOD rental units into subgroups, and then I rerun the model for each subgroup, find control cases for them, and compare the average monthly rate. So this is the result. So here, what you see here is TOD premiums for rental units of different dwelling sizes. So my finding is that studio and one-bedroom rental units, they are quite similar in terms of the TOD premium. It's about $85, $86 per month. That's about 4.0 to 4.6% of the rent. And the TOD rent premium is higher for larger dwelling sizes unit. So for 2-bedroom, it is $180, and for rental units with 3-bedroom or more, or 3 more bedrooms, the average the monthly rent premium is $242. That's about 7.6% of the rent. So generally speaking, TOD premiums are higher for larger apartments. Here you see I divide or categorize 694 real transit stations into 3 groups through a cluster analysis. So basically, I classify the TOD stations into 3 groups. The first group is urban TOD. The urban TODs, they are in central locations, or they are very close to CBD. Is only so like the average distance to CBD is only 1/2 mile, 1.5 mile. They have very high population density. They have very high job density, and most of them are actually in the Bay Area. The suburban TODs, as the name implies, they are more likely to in suburban neighborhoods. They have medium-high population density. They have medium-high job density. They are more likely to be in the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And the third group is called TAD. It means development is not designed. It's not designed to support transit. They're just close to transit, but they're not designed to support transit. They are likely to in exurban areas. They have low population density, low job density. They are more likely to be in Sacramento and San Diego. So let's see which type of TOD generate greater rent premium. So here we go. So you see the suburban TOD actually generate a greater TOD rent premium. It's $153 than urban TOD, that is $128. So interestingly, it means rental properties in suburban neighborhoods are likely to see a greater TOD premium than rental properties in central cities. And interestingly, the TAD, that means development not designed to support transit, still generates some premium, even though it is lower. It is $76. And lastly, I want to know if the TOD premium will vary in different California metro areas. So here you see, yes, it does. In the greater LA region, which include the Los Angeles metropolitan area, Riverside, the Inland Empire, and the Ventura County. So that's the 5-county LA region. The TOD premium is a negative $23. It is not statistically significant from 0. So basically, there's no TOD rental premium in LA, but the Bay Area is $200, $202. And in San Diego, it is $169. So percentage-wise, in Bay Area, there is a 7% rent premium. And in San Diego, it is 8%. These are significant numbers given the already high rent in the Bay Area and in San Diego. So I think that's basically the major findings of this study. So before wrapping it up, I would like to remind you a few limitations of this study. One is that the data, the crack-list data I scraped, it is cross-sectional. So ideally, I'd like to have longitudinal data at two time points that are at least a few years apart. And between them, new transit surveys is introduced. And then I can compare how the rent of the treatment group and the rent of the control group change over time. And I can calculate difference in difference, but that's not possible because of data constraint. Another limitation, as I mentioned earlier, is that crack-list data are not representative. They tend to overrepresent the higher end of the rental market. And the other limitation with the methodology is that when I don't allow replacement, when I run probabilistic matching, I was not able to find a proper appropriate control cases for every TOD rental units. So basically, I found that it is hard to find a match if a rental unit is located in central locations with very high density, particularly when there are studios or one bedroom. For example, it is more difficult to find a match for rental units in downtown San Francisco. That makes sense because downtown San Francisco is so unique. It is really hard to find similar neighborhoods outside of downtown San Francisco in other parts of California. So that's another limitation. So I'm a little less certain about the TOD premium in central cities in California. So that's the limitations. So let's wrap it up. What I have found in this study. One, so data and methodology wise, I found that calculated data are useful, particularly when local governments don't provide us complete comprehensive rent data. So I believe local government should systematically collect rent data, just like what they do with housing transaction data. Actually, Portland is taking the lead. Portland requires landlords to register their rental properties to the city by 2020. So this year, hopefully Portland will make the data public so we can use the data so we don't have to rely on calculated data or other privately owned data that we have to pay a lot of money to buy. Methodology-wise, I find a few advantages of using the propensity score matching or the hedonic regression model. Even when I'm not able to find appropriate control cases, I know which TOD units are not matched. So that means it is transparent. If you decide to run a regression, that is still a problem. It is just less evident. So the study shows that the average rent in California, the average TOD rent premium in California is $127. That's about 5% of the average rent. And the TOD rent premium is greater for larger rental units. TOD rent premium is a lot higher in the Bay Area and in San Diego, but there is almost none in Los Angeles. And I also found that suburban TOD generate a greater rent premium than urban TOD. And what are the implications of these findings? So the first implication is that the threat of gentrification is real. So even though I did not find any evidence that TOD could cause gentrification in Portland, it is a real issue in the Bay Area and in San Diego. So that means real transit could worsen the housing affordability problems. In Bay Area in San Diego, the rent are already very high. Renters are already burdened. So the TOD rent premium means they have to pay even higher prices to live close to a real transit. However, I would like to remind you that the general effect, the overall effect of TOD on affordability also depend on whether renters can save money on transportation expenditures. So that's my next step. I would like to know whether renters can save transportation costs if they live close to real transit. There are a few equity implications. The first one is the inequality between renters and homeowners. We know that renters and homeowners are not equal. Renters are in a disadvantaged position in terms of a wealth accumulation and a tax deduction. And the positive TOD premium makes things even worse. So that means, well, homeowners can benefit from TOD, well, renters have to pay more to live in TOD. And so renters pay a premium to live close to TOD, and they pay money to their landlords, to housing investors. Well, we know that it's the city, it is local governments, it is the federal government are investing, are spending a lot of money to build a rail transit, to operate the rail transit. So it seems not, even though, well, yeah, it makes landlords, they pay a little higher property tax, but is that enough? So we may need a better value capture mechanism to make sure local governments, the federal government who invest money in public transit, they got the return. So the taxpayers got the return from this investment. So that's the equity implications of this study. And the last slide. So that's the next step. So as I said, the general or the overall affordability impact of TOD depend on how much renters pay for rent. It also depends how much money they pay for transportation. So next step, I'd like to know whether renters in TODs, do they drive less? They have lower VMT? Do they own fewer or smaller number of vehicles so they can save money on transportation costs? And then I would like to compare their savings on transportation with the TOD premiums they have to pay to live in TOD. And then I will be able to know the overall effect of TOD on affordability. And that's my next step. With that, I think that's my last slide. Before taking questions, I would like to thank Track at PSU and Dr. Liming Wang for inviting me to give the talk. I would like to thank Teresa for helping me to set up the seminar. And I will be happy to answer questions. I will give it back to Teresa, I believe.
Great.
So,
yes.
Okay, let me change.
And Dr. Dong, yes, thank you.
All right. Teresa, do we have any questions?
I have quite a few questions here.
Okay.
And I'm going to show my screen with our final slide. And all right, so I've got some questions here. The first one is back to the beginning of your presentation, some curiosity about what does trail transit stations include? Does that include Caltrains, BART, or light rail?
So the 708 transit stations include all modes of rail transit. I only exclude the 2 funicular stations. I also exclude 12 airport rail link stations that serve airport passengers only. So it includes everything like Caltrains, highway rail, light rail, BRT. They are all included.
Okay, great. And could there potentially be a moratorium on housing prices for TOZ zones so that prices don't go up due to transit improvements? Theoretically, living in TOD zones could be cheaper given that density equals greater efficiency, especially in land use, utilities, infrastructure, and property tax efficiencies. Do you think that we presuppose too much when it comes to transit infrastructure and its impacts on property values? Increasing property values is not necessarily a good thing if it increases the cost of living per capita instead of the aggregate value of the properties.
Okay, that's a long question. So let me repeat the question. So the question is about what can we do to like rent control to mitigate the impact of rail transit on rent? Is that question?
Yes, that's what I understand. Could there be a moratorium on housing prices?
Well, California already has a rent control. It passed the end of last year, I believe. So there is a 7% cap for rent increase every year. It will be effective this year, I believe. But like the SB 50, rent control could be actually is very controversial. So when we put a control on rent, we may have the so like the idea behind SB 50. So the idea behind this SB 50 are at least threefold. One, if we can build more homes close to transit, people can use public transit more. That is more sustainable. They may save money on public transit. And the other reason for SB 50 is to encourage housing supply. So we can build higher density development in some neighborhoods. So we can increase house supply and to encourage builders to build more. So if builders build more homes, increase housing supply, hopefully that mitigate the housing price pressure a little. So as I said, California already have the rent control. I'm not sure we need more control in addition to the rent control we already have.
Great. We have a question from Portland State University Professor Liming Wang. Hongwei, when you create your control group for PSM, do you do it by metro area, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, or statewide?
Oh, so when I run the general model for the entire California, I use the metro area as one of the 18 variables. So basically, I want to make sure the share of controls in each metro area are similar to the share of rental units in each metro area in the treatment. So metropolitan areas, each one is used as a binary dummy variable in my PSM model. So the metropolitan areas are controlled, and then when I run the sub models, so I run the sub model for each metro area. Of course, every rental unit is in the same metro area. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Great. On that line, have you considered the differences in TOD premium by type of transit?
Yes. I did not report that part because I find the real transit mode, for example, streetcar, light rail, highway rail, BRT, they are highly correlated with the metro area. For example, the streetcar. Most of the streetcar stations are in downtown San Francisco. They are the difficult part of this analysis. Basically, I was not able to find good matches for many rental units served by streetcar in downtown San Francisco. I did run the regression. I did run the model for them, but I decided to not report them because I'm not sure it is the real transit mode or it is the location. They are highly correlated.
All right. I'll do one last question here since it's almost 12:30. This question's from Jennifer Dill at Portland State University. She asks, you found no premium in LA, but large ones in the Bay Area and San Diego. Do you think that might be related to the value of using rail transit in those areas? In other words, people aren't using rail transit as much where there isn't a premium, so proximity to rail isn't valued.
Well, that could be a reason. So how many people use rail transit? Another potential factor is the urban farm, even though I controlled neighborhood environment already, there could be a regional effect. So how compact each region is. Of course, this is related to the issue Jennifer raised, is how many people use transit in each metro area. So obviously in the Bay Area, in San Diego, more people use rail transit, and when they use rail transit, they can reach more opportunities. For example, more jobs, more retail, shopping opportunities. So that could be a reason. So I think that's why I run separate models for each metro area. The regional effect disappears. It shows different results. So TOD premium is almost zero in LA. So you can find a lot of literature discussing why rail transit is not successful in the LA region.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hongwei Dong. This is the end of our Friday Transportation Seminar. This seminar has been recorded and will be posted on the TREC website, as well as emailed to all attendees in a day or two. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Dr. Dong for sharing his work. And you can view other professional development offerings on our website at trec.pdx.edu. And if you have a question that wasn't responded to, I will be giving Hongwei Dong a opportunity to answer those directly later. So go ahead and send them in. And lastly, once I end the webinar, a survey will pop up for attendees to complete, and it's pretty quick. We'd appreciate it if you could fill that out for us. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thanks for everyone for watching the webinar.
Yes, thanks so much, Dr. Dong. Have a great day.
Thank you, Teresa.
Take
Okay,
care.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.